Yeah, that's a great question. So it's not a secret. It's a fact that many people surprisingly don't know about, that at least in the pure sciences, like in chemistry or math or physics, you're paid to go to grad school. You don't pay. You get a stipend. They paid me to learn about my field and get an advanced degree. Now, they didn't pay me very much, but they paid me. Okay, so something at the level of, $18,000 a year or something like that. I could live, it was enough to live in the dorms, to buy the food that I wanted to go on a few trips every year, to, buy a used car and head up to Yosemite with my friends, right? So that's a really important thing. And when you're getting for a PhD, you're usually paid a stipend. Now, in the sciences, that stipend comes out of your professor's grants. That was a question about how much grant money I needed. My grant money pays for the students. In the humanities, typically the students will have to teach to pay for their degrees. But in these fields, you're paid. It's nice change from college, actually. I did have loans in college, and I paid back those loans. You don't have to pay them back while you're still in school. So they only become due at some gradual rate after you've graduated from graduate school. And at that point, as a postdoc, as standard in physics, standard postdoc salaries are $40,000, $45,000 now, right? And that's enough to at least pay off a monthly loan until you're faculty and you can pay back more, or until you get a job and you can pay back more. So you can get loans, and typically the loans don't come due until you have a job, right? Now, if you go to a professional school, you do have to pay for that, right? If you go to optometry school, or if you want to get a master's in engineering, for example, you pay for that. But then the first job you get in those fields are usually pretty high paying, right? So if you can swallow paying some interest for a few years, after 4 or 5 years, I suspect your salary will be high enough that you can pay back those loans relatively easily, okay? So it's scary to owe a lot of money. It really is. But you have to understand that, just do the calculation, figure out what your salary will be if you get an advanced degree versus what you don't, and figure out how much, subtract the amount for the loans and look at the difference. You'll definitely not only get out ahead financially, but you'll have a better job, something more interesting. That's why people do it. If it didn't make sense, you wouldn't see people going into these fields, right? You wouldn't see smart people doing it, right? They're worried about the same thing you are, and they've done that calculation, I think. Yes.
You mentioned the Association of African American and Hispanic Physicists.
Yes.
Is there an undergraduate or student division attached to that? And does that association also address efforts and ways to nurture and encourage minorities in science?
Right, that's an excellent question, thank you. And the answer is yes. In fact, the same conference is a joint student and professional conference, which I find great because it allows students to go to talks by professionals and us to be there to help mentor the students. So that's something that you could actually go on the web, the National Conference of Black and Hispanic Physicists, and they pay for students to go to the conference. You don't pay out of pocket. They will fly you out there and put you in a hotel and pay for you to go to the conference for 4 days. Okay, you have to register, and you have to be one of the first to register for it, but there's hundreds of students who go there who are paid to do this sort of thing. So these are things you just need to find out about. Ask faculty, this is why someone like me is here, to tell you that these things exist. I don't know if it exists for chemistry. I do know that some math graduate students have come to the conference. They've sort of sneaked their way in because they're the hard sciences. Material science people have snuck their way in too, right? You just have to get a recommendation, I think, from a faculty member. So this is a conference that they pay for you to go. It's an annual conference. There's many other students there and there are faculty. There are special sessions on, how to get into graduate school, how to choose your field in physics, tutorials on the different areas, homework tutorials, how to choose an advisor. And like I said, it's not, as important as all of these sessions is just being with other people, right? Meeting these other students. And I can actually give an example. I currently have an African-American graduate student who, when she came to graduate school, she wasn't happy about being labeled as a minority in physics. And I understand that, and I respected that. She was a physicist first. You know, it wasn't that she was a woman, it wasn't that she was black, she was a physicist, and she wanted people to recognize that. She didn't want to take part in any of these organizations. She didn't want to go to the meeting. She felt like that was just pushing her into a stereotype that she didn't want to be in. And I understood that, and I respected that. But I think one of the other students finally convinced her to go because they said, you know, why don't you try this? It's a free trip. It's sort of fun, right? And she went, and lo and behold, she made friends, right? She made friends there. She found a peer group. She made friends with the other graduate students from our department who went there. And she realized it wasn't that she was being pigeonholed into a stereotype, that there were just a bunch of physics nerds just like her who liked and supported each other. That was all there was, right? And it was a great pleasure for me to see this year her organize the other students in attending the conference, right? Because it was a place where she found support. And like I said, you can find it in lots of different places, and this is just one of those. So you can look online, National Conference of Black and Hispanic Physicists. You can see if there's one for chemistry. I can try to find that out, or for math. But these things exist, and they're online. And like I said, there are other fellowships and other things that you can look into. I had this Mellon Fellowship as an undergraduate that has a similar peer group, actually from across academia. And I really value their friendship, too. So you can find out these things. As in graduate school, you mean? Yeah, undergraduate, I just looked at, so if you want to do research as an undergraduate, for these summer programs, I applied pretty widely and just looked at, again, to see what's interesting. I did one in plasma physics, right? I thought that was sort of cool, you know, energy. They were trying to get the plasma reactor, fusion reactor, to get, you know, this good energy source, and I thought that was just a really great idea. But then once I got in the field, I realized I've been trying it for like 30 years and it never worked, and I wasn't that excited. So I don't know. Not that it's a bad field if you do it. I mean, it's just that for me, it wasn't it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I just, like I said, I poked around on what was interesting for me for these summer programs. At my university, I worked for a couple semesters in a lab, and in that case, I, again, just looked on the websites. You know, people are pretty friendly. If you email them and say, I'm interested in working with you, they'll say yes or no. If they say yes, that's great. If they say no, you know, then they say no. Like I said, I advise undergraduates, and I tell all the students, go find an advisor. So I have a lot of students who come from the Chicago suburbs, and one of them said he wanted to go home. I said, okay, then just email faculty at University of Chicago and Northwestern, say who you are, send your CV, and say, can I work for you? And I said, and then just volunteer to work for free. Since you're living at home, just do it. And he did it, and sure enough, he got into this great lab at Northwestern. The guy even paid him. He got a lot of research experience, and it just all worked out. It doesn't always all work out, but if you, like I said, you know, you just have to keep pushing it and see what happens. So, you know, so I did that sort of thing. I just emailed people. In graduate school, again, I came to graduate school to work with a certain professor. He was the reason I came to graduate school. I worked for a semester in his lab and realized I wasn't interested in switched groups. Yeah. So you did the same thing. Is that, yeah. So you never know. Things don't work out always. And, you know, so I could have been depressed and thought, oh, I came here and it wasn't the person I wanted to do. But, you know, you should also make sure when you choose places with lots of options. You know, don't go to graduate school that has one professor you want to work with and no one else. You know, don't go to any sort of school that has one thing you want to do. It's really good in one area and terrible in everything else. Because if you find out you don't want to do that one thing, you're sort of in trouble, right? Try to find a place that's a little bit broad. Try to find a school that has a couple people you're interested in, a couple things you may want to do, and then you have flexibility, right? So for me, I chose somewhere specifically that had 3 or 4 people that seemed interesting, and then I went and talked to those other people, and it ended up working out. So.